I still remember the first time I heard this story. It started with just one sentence, a quiet voice, almost trembling. My dad, he made me this way. And even before I knew the details, something inside me froze. You know that feeling when a simple line hits harder than it should? That's what this felt like. Like there was a whole lifetime hidden behind those 7 words. I could almost picture the place where it happened. A lonely ranch stretched under a huge, empty sky. Wind brushing over dry grass. The kind of silence that makes every sound feel louder. A rancher standing by his fence, just minding his day, and then hearing that one sentence from someone who looked like they'd been carrying it forever. The rancher didn't move at first, didn't speak. I imagine he just stared, trying to understand what those words meant and what kind of story they were about to open. Because in that moment you can tell, this isn't small, this isn't casual. This is someone stepping out of their own darkness and finally letting someone else see it. And the rancher, someone used to dealing with storms, wild animals, broken bones, looked shaken in a way he hadn't been in years. I can almost feel the tension of that silence, the shock, the weight of a truth he wasn't prepared for. But what he did next, nobody in their right mind would expect. And honestly, that's the part that kept me hooked. Because the moment he made his choice, everything changed. The rancher wasn't the kind of man who talked much about himself. People around town described him as steady. The kind of steady that comes from waking up before the sunrise every single day, checking fences, feeding cattle, fixing whatever needed fixing, and never expecting anyone to say thank you. He had lived most of his life on that ranch, passed down from his father and his father before him. Hard land, tough weather, quiet nights. A place where you learn early that nothing grows without effort, and nothing survives without strength. But the truth is, even a strong man has places inside him he never lets anyone see. The rancher had his own past buried deep, his own mistakes, his own regrets. He'd built routines around them, let the rhythm of chores cover the parts of him he didn't want to face. He was a man used to control, a man who thought he understood the world well enough not to be surprised anymore. And then came the kid, not a child, not fully grown. That age where you look almost like an adult, but the world still feels like a giant weight you don't know how to hold. The kid had been around the ranch before, helping out sometimes. The rancher didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. You can tell a lot just by watching someone work. And this kid, quiet, careful, almost too gentle for a place like this, always seemed like he was trying to disappear into the background. The rancher noticed it, even if he didn't comment. There's a kind of silence people carry that says more than words ever could. The kid had that silence, the kind that feels learned, not chosen. That day when the kid finally spoke, it wasn't planned. You can tell when words come out because someone forced themselves to say them. But these came out because the kid couldn't hold them in anymore. The rancher had been doing something simple, something ordinary. He was untangling a rope near the barn, the sun almost setting. The air smelled like hay and dust. The kid stood there, hesitant, shifting weight from one foot to the other. Then came that line. My dad, he made me this way. The rancher felt it before he understood it, like someone had suddenly pulled the temperature down. A sentence like that doesn't fall out of someone's mouth casually. It comes from a place deeper than fear, from something shaped over years, something carved into a person by someone they trusted. The rancher let the rope fall from his hands. He turned slowly, not wanting to spook the kid, not wanting to push too fast. He had known tough men all his life, and he'd known broken ones too. But this was different. This was someone on the edge of collapsing or breaking open. The kid kept looking at the ground, shoulders tight, hands shaking just enough to notice. And the rancher could feel it in the air. Whatever was coming next wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be light. It was going to be something you can't step away from once you've heard it. And maybe that's why he didn't say anything. He didn't want to fill the silence with empty phrases or useless comfort. He just stood there, letting the moment stretch, waiting for the kid to keep going. Sometimes the smallest bit of patience can be the difference between someone shutting down and someone finally telling the truth. The kid finally raised his head. Not fully, but enough for the rancher to see the eyes. Red, tired, frustrated, and something else, something like shame. But not the kind of shame you earn. The kind placed on you by someone who should have protected you but didn't. "He changed everything," the kid whispered. "How I talk, how I move, how I think. It's like he built me, every part of me. And not in a good way." The rancher felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not anger at the kid, never that. Anger at the dad he hadn't met. Because men like that, men who use their power to bend someone small and young into fear. The rancher had known a few, and he hated that type more than anything else in the world. But he still didn't interrupt. He wanted to understand, to let the kid finish. "He always said he was making me stronger," the kid continued. "But all he really did was make me scared. Scared of what happens if I step out of the line he drew, scared of being myself, scared of everything." The rancher swallowed, hard, because he knew that feeling. Not from his father exactly, but from the way he grew up, from the men he watched, from the pain he tucked away. And suddenly the distance between him and the kid didn't feel so wide. Pain has a way of tying strangers together. The kid looked up fully then, and it was like watching a dam tremble. "I don't even know who I'm supposed to be. I just know who he told me to be. And I hate it. I hate who I am. I hate that he made me this way." Those words didn't just hit the rancher. They went through him. Because there's nothing harder than believing the worst parts of yourself aren't even yours. That someone else carved them into you. Someone who should have loved you the right way. The rancher felt the world quiet around them. Even the wind seemed to pause, like it was listening too. There are moments in life when you realize you're standing at a crossroads you never chose. Moments when someone else's pain becomes something you can't ignore, even if you want to. The rancher took a slow breath. He felt the sting of memories he thought he'd buried years ago. Memories of his own father's sharp words, his own failures, his own fear of becoming the same kind of man. Suddenly, it wasn't just the kid standing in front of him with a broken past. It was the rancher's younger self too, reflected in the kid's eyes. And for the first time in a very long time, the rancher felt unsure. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Because he knew that whatever he did next would matter. It would shape something real. It might even change the kid's life. He knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. But he also knew he had to choose his next move carefully. Because once he acted, there would be no going back. The rancher stood there longer than he meant to. Long enough for the kid to start shifting again, wiping at his face like he regretted saying anything at all. And that bothered the rancher more than anything. The idea that this kid had learned to apologize for feeling hurt. Learned to hide pain because someone taught him pain was weakness. He couldn't let the silence turn into shame, not this time. So he took one slow step forward, boots scraping against the dirt. Not fast, not loud, just enough to show he wasn't walking away. He didn't reach out. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed to touch someone who flinched at raised hands. He just got close enough that the kid could feel he wasn't alone. "What did he do to you?" the rancher asked, voice low, steady, like he was talking to a scared colt, not a broken person. "Tell me plain." The kid hesitated. You could almost see the war happening inside. One part desperate to let it all out, the other terrified to say too much. When someone grows up afraid of being punished for honesty, the truth feels dangerous, even when it needs to be spoken. But then the kid exhaled a shaky breath and the story started to spill. "It wasn't just the yelling," the kid said. "It was everything. The rules, the way he watched me, the way he told me who I was before I ever figured it out myself." The rancher's jaw tightened. He'd seen that kind of parenting before. People calling it discipline or tough love, when really it was just control. Just fear dressed up as authority. "He said I was weak," the kid continued. "Said I was too soft. Said if I kept acting like myself, the world would crush me. So he tried to crush me first, I guess." The rancher felt something twist inside him. He knew men who believed that nonsense, men who thought breaking a child was the same thing as making them strong. But he'd seen the truth. Broken kids didn't grow into strong adults. They grew into adults who never stopped feeling small. The kid kept going, words trembling but gaining momentum, like they'd been waiting years to escape. He'd make me do things just to toughen me up. Chores that were way too hard. Work meant for grown men. And if I couldn't keep up, if I tripped or cried or said I was tired, he'd look at me like I'd disappointed him just by existing, like I was some mistake he had to fix. The rancher felt heat rising up his neck, not the heat of embarrassment, the heat of anger, controlled, quiet anger, the kind that grows when you hear about cruelty done by someone who should have been a protector. The kid's voice softened, almost a whisper, and after a while I stopped trying to be me. I tried to be whatever he wanted. I changed the way I talked so I wouldn't sound weak. I changed the way I walked so I wouldn't look scared. I changed everything, and I hate it. I feel like I'm not even a real person. That broke something in the rancher. It hit deeper than he expected, because buried inside those words he heard echoes of his own past. He remembered being young, trying to be the son his father demanded instead of the person he really was. He remembered the exhaustion of holding himself rigid, pretending not to care, pretending not to hurt, pretending he was made of stone. And he remembered the day he realized he didn't even know what he actually liked or wanted anymore. He only knew what he'd been told to want. The memory stung like an old wound suddenly torn open. The rancher looked at the kid again, really looked. The slumped shoulders, the guarded eyes, the way he held himself tight like he was bracing for impact even though there was no threat in sight. That wasn't weakness. That was survival. The kind of survival that marks a person inside, shaping them without permission. He took a breath, slow and steady, grounding himself before he spoke. Kid, your dad didn't make you, not the real you. He pushed you. He scared you. He shaped your reactions, but he didn't build your soul. The kid blinked, confused, maybe even a little skeptical. The rancher wasn't done. That man told you lies, he said quietly. He told you fear is strength. He told you silence is safety. He told you who you had to be so he wouldn't have to face who he was. The kid's lip trembled, not out of weakness, out of recognition. The rancher continued, voice steady but softer than before. He tried to mold you into something he understood, but he never destroyed the part of you that's yours. I promise you that. The kid shook his head. You don't know that. I do, the rancher said firmly. Because you're standing here telling me the truth, that means you're still in there, the real you, the one he tried to bury, someone who can still feel, still question, still hope. Weak people don't do that. Broken people don't do that. You do that because you're stronger than he ever was. For a moment, the kid just stared at him, like no one had ever said something like that before. Like the idea that he had strength inside him was brand new and almost unbelievable. But then something flickered in his eyes. Not joy, not confidence, just a tiny spark of disbelief starting to shift into possibility. The rancher saw it happen, the smallest lift in the kid's shoulders, the tiniest release of tension in the jaw. A moment so small most people wouldn't notice. But the rancher wasn't most people. He knew what it looked like when someone took their first breath after being held underwater for years. And he knew this was only the beginning. A confession wasn't the end of a story like this. It was the opening of a door that had been locked for far too long. The kid wasn't healed, he wasn't fixed, but he'd spoken the truth. And the rancher, he felt something shift inside himself too. Some old part of him waking up, deciding this wasn't a moment he could walk away from. Because once you hear a kid say, "My dad made me this way," you don't stand by and watch them drown in it. Not if you have any heart left at all. And the rancher had more heart than he ever admitted. The rancher didn't know it yet, but the next few seconds were going to change everything. It started with a simple thought, one that rose up in him like an instinct he hadn't felt in years. I can't let this kid go back to the same life after telling me all this. The idea sat heavy in his chest. It wasn't planned. It wasn't logical. It was just there, pushing against his ribs, demanding action. The kid stood there waiting, shoulders small and drawn in like he expected the rancher to send him away. Maybe that's what adults usually did. Maybe that's what he'd been taught to expect: politeness, distance, people saying sorry to hear that, and then pretending everything was fine. The rancher could almost see the kid bracing for that same pattern, but the rancher surprised even himself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture. He just took a breath that felt deeper than any he'd taken in years and said, "You're not going back there tonight." The kid froze. Not like someone who'd heard good news, more like someone who couldn't trust what he'd just heard. "What?" he whispered. "You heard me," the rancher said, steady as a fence post. "You're staying here for now." The kid shook his head fast. "No, no, I can't. My dad, he'll get mad, really mad. He'll come looking for me." The rancher's eyes hardened, but not in a cruel way, more like a storm forming far out on the horizon. "Let him come," he said quietly. There was no bravado in his tone, no threat, just a calm certainty that sent a chill through the air. Because when a man who rarely speaks suddenly draws a line, you can feel it. It's like the earth shifts beneath your boots. The kid looked terrified. "You don't understand. He'll blame me. He always blames me." The rancher shook his head. "No, kid, this time he'll have to go through me." The wind carried the words across the empty yard, and even the horses in the nearby corral lifted their heads as if they sensed the tension. The kid swallowed hard, staring at him like he had never seen someone stand up for him before. And maybe he hadn't, but he still looked unsure. "Why would you do that for me?" The rancher had to think for a moment. Why would he? He wasn't the kid's relative. He wasn't a teacher or a mentor or anyone with a duty. He was just a man who worked the land and kept to himself. But something about the kid's pain had cracked open a part of him he'd sealed shut long ago. "You remind me of someone," he finally said. "Someone I should have helped a long time ago." He didn't say who. He didn't have to. The kid stared at him, searching his face, and found something there he didn't expect: honesty, not softness, not pity. Just a truth the rancher couldn't hide even if he wanted to. The kid's breathing steadied a little, but the fear didn't disappear. Old fear never goes that easily. He kept glancing toward the dusty road leading away from the ranch, expecting a truck to roll up at any moment. The rancher stepped closer and spoke gently. "Look at me." The kid hesitated, then lifted his eyes. "You're safe here," the rancher said. "No one's hurting you today, not while I'm standing." The words were simple, but they hit the kid like thunder. Safety wasn't something he was used to. It wasn't a feeling he trusted. But hearing it, even for one moment, shook something loose inside him. The rancher turned and walked toward the barn, motioning for the kid to follow. Inside, the fading sunlight cut long shadows across the wooden floor. Dust floated in the air like tiny sparks. The rancher grabbed a stool and sat down, letting the kid lean against a stack of hay bales. He didn't push for more details. He didn't ask questions the kid wasn't ready to answer. He just let the silence settle again, this time gentler, warmer. A silence that didn't punish. A silence that didn't judge. After a while, the kid spoke again, voice low. "What if he tries to take me back? He always finds a way." The rancher rubbed his hands together slowly, thinking. Then, with a tone that was calm but final, he said, "If your father steps onto this property with the intention of harming you, he'll be dealing with the wrong man. I've handled worse than him. Trust me." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even anger. It was a promise carved from something solid, something earned through years of surviving a world that wasn't always kind. The kid's eyes filled again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. A strange, foreign relief he didn't know how to express. He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed, but the rancher pretended not to notice. Letting someone keep their dignity is a quiet form of kindness. "Why are you being so nice?" the kid asked quietly. The rancher leaned back, stared at the dust floating in the sunbeam. "Because someone should have been nice to you a long time ago." The kid didn't respond. He didn't have to. Something inside him softened, almost against his will. And then it happened, the moment the rancher did the unthinkable. Not loud, Not dramatic. He didn't storm off. He didn't call the sheriff. He didn't pack the kid into a truck and drive away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, old metal key and held it out. "This opens the spare bedroom in the house," he said. "It's yours for as long as you need it." The kid's mouth fell open. A key, a real key, to a door, to a room, to a place that was his, even if just for a night. It was the unthinkable because for a man like the rancher, private, solitary, guarded, letting someone into his home wasn't normal. Letting someone into his life was even more impossible. But he did it anyway, without hesitation. The kid stared at the key like it was the most unbelievable thing he'd ever held. And maybe it was. Because in that small, simple act, the rancher offering shelter, protection, a chance to breathe, everything shifted. Not just for the kid, but for the rancher too. The kid didn't take the key right away. He held his hand out, pulled it back, then reached again as if the small piece of metal might burn him if he touched it. It wasn't the key that scared him. It was what it meant. A door he could close without fear. A room where footsteps outside wouldn't make him jump. A space where he didn't have to brace for anger, or cold silence, or whatever mood his father decided to bring home. He finally took it slowly, almost like he expected the rancher to change his mind. But the rancher didn't move, didn't flinch. Just watched the kid close his fingers around the key, the way you'd watch someone pick up something fragile and important. The kid swallowed, still staring at his hand. I don't know what to say." "You don't owe me anything," the rancher replied. "Just breathe, that's enough for now." It wasn't a poetic line. It wasn't meant to be comforting in a dramatic way. But the kid felt something loosen in his chest anyway, like he hadn't taken a real breath in years. He let the air out, shaky and slow, and the rancher nodded as if that single exhale meant something to him too. The sun dipped lower, turning the dust in the barn gold. The sound of the horses shifting, the creak of the wood, everything felt softer. Not warm exactly, but not sharp anymore. The kid sat down on the old hay bale beside him, hugging his knees like someone who wasn't sure he was allowed to relax. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel dangerous. "Does it ever go away?" the kid finally whispered. "The feeling that you're broken." The rancher didn't answer right away. He rubbed his hands together, thinking, not about himself, but about whether telling the truth would help or hurt. Honesty meant revisiting things he hadn't touched in years. But the kid deserved something real, something not polished or easy. "No," the rancher said softly, "it doesn't go away." The kid's shoulders sagged a little, like he'd expected that answer but hoped for something different. "But," the rancher continued, "it stops controlling you. It stops defining you. And one day you get to decide who you want to be, not him, not anyone else." The kid looked at him, eyes hopeful in a tired kind of way. "How long does that take?" "A while," the rancher said honestly. "Longer than it should. But not forever." The kid didn't smile, but something in his face shifted, like he was letting the words sink in at their own pace. The rancher leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Kid, you've been surviving. That's the hardest part. Healing comes after, and healing's slow. But you already made the first step. You told someone the truth." The kid nodded, voice shaky. "I was scared you'd think I was weak." "You think telling the truth makes you weak?" the rancher asked. "That's what your dad taught you, not life. Life knows better." The kid seemed to absorb that, chewing on it quietly. Then he whispered, "What if I don't know who I am without him?" The rancher let out a slow breath. "Then we figure it out. Bit by bit. You don't need all the answers today." It was simple. So simple the kid didn't know what to do with it. Support without strings. Guidance without judgment. It felt unreal. They walked toward the house as the sky faded into deep blue. The rancher opened the door and motioned him inside. The place wasn't fancy. Old wood floors, mismatched chairs, the smell of coffee that seemed permanently absorbed into the walls. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Safe in a way the kid hadn't felt in years. He looked at the spare room, a plain bed, a small dresser, a single lamp, nothing special. But to him, it was everything. A room that didn't feel like a prison. A room that didn't echo with someone else's anger. The kid stood there for a long moment taking it in. The rancher didn't rush him. He just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching carefully. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. "You hear me? There's no timeline." The kid looked back, eyes glassy. "What if my dad comes?" "He won't go through me," the rancher said with quiet conviction. "And if he tries, he'll learn what a mistake that is." The kid's breath hitched, not from fear but disbelief. Someone was willing to defend him. Someone who didn't need anything in return. Someone who didn't want to change him or fix him or mold him. Just someone who wanted him safe. He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over the blanket. Not testing it, just making sure it was real. The rancher lingered in the doorway. "Kid," he said, "you didn't deserve what happened to you, but you deserve what happens next. You hear me? You deserve this." The kid nodded slowly. "Thank you." The rancher nodded back, but he didn't smile. He wasn't the smiling type. Instead, he said, "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes after." He turned to leave, but the kid suddenly spoke again, voice soft. "Do you really think I can be someone better?" The rancher stopped. Turned back. His eyes softened in a way the kid had never seen before. "You already are," he said. "You just haven't met that version of yourself yet." The kid swallowed hard, looking down at the key still clenched in his hand. He didn't let go of it, not even when the rancher closed the door gently behind him. In that quiet room, the kid lay back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in forever, he didn't feel watched. He didn't feel judged. He didn't feel trapped. He felt possible. And he held that feeling close, unsure of how long it would last, but knowing, deep down, that tonight was the first night he wasn't defined by fear. And the rancher, standing in the quiet hallway outside, felt something shift in him too. Something old, something heavy, something waking up again. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it, a beginning. The rancher didn't sleep much that night. He lay in his bed staring at the wooden beams overhead, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the wind brushing against the windows, the distant call of coyotes somewhere out past the fields. But beneath all that, he listened for one thing, the quiet. The kind of quiet that told him the kid was still in that room, still safe, still breathing. Every few minutes he found himself glancing toward the hallway, just to make sure he hadn't imagined everything, that the kid hadn't disappeared like a ghost the moment the lights went out. It was strange. He'd lived alone for so long that having another presence in the house felt both unfamiliar and right, like something that should have been there the whole time. Across the hall, the kid lay awake too. He stared at the small lamp, left on dim by the rancher so the darkness wouldn't feel like a trap. He kept one hand under his pillow and the other wrapped tightly around the key. He didn't plan it, it just happened. His fingers curled around the cool metal every time fear crept up his throat. He wasn't used to this. A bed that didn't sag under someone's anger. A room that didn't echo with footsteps he had to decode. A door he could close without being punished. He kept waiting for the rancher's voice booming through the hallway, demanding to know why he wasn't asleep or why he needed a light on. But nothing came. Just quiet. A safe quiet. And that scared him more than anything. Safety wasn't something he knew how to trust. Sometime after midnight, the kid finally drifted off, his breathing soft and uneven, like his body wasn't sure if it was allowed to rest. The rancher, hearing that faint shift in the air, closed his eyes too. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't dream of the past. Morning came early, as mornings always do on a ranch. The sun didn't ask permission. It spilled into the house, warm and sudden, lighting everything in soft gold. The rancher got up first out of habit. His joints cracked the same way they always did. But today felt different. Today he wasn't waking up alone. He made coffee, the strong kind, filling the kitchen with a smell that cut through the morning chill. He kept glancing down the hallway, wondering when the kid would come out, wondering if he'd slept at all, wondering if he'd still be there. Eventually he heard footsteps, small ones, cautious ones. The kid appeared in the doorway, hair messy, eyes puffy, shoulders tense like he expected he was already in trouble for waking up too late. "You hungry?" the rancher asked. The kid froze. Maybe no one had asked him that in years. Maybe the question itself felt like a trap, a test, something he could fail. I guess," the kid said. "That's not an answer," the rancher replied, pouring another cup of coffee. "You hungry or not?" The kid hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I am." "Good," the rancher said. "Sit." The kid sat slowly, shoulders rounded, posture small, like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. The rancher pretended not to notice. Instead, he put a plate in front of him, eggs, toast, bacon. Simple. But to the kid, it felt like someone had set a feast before him. He didn't dig in right away. He waited, studied the rancher, watched for cues. That was the saddest part, this instinctive fear that eating too fast or too slow might be wrong. The rancher saw it, and without thinking, he said, "You ain't gotta prove anything here. Food's for eating, that's it." Something in the kid's shoulders relaxed at that, just a little, and then he took a bite, a real bite. And for the first time since the rancher met him, the kid didn't look scared, he looked human, like a boy who was finally allowed to exist. They ate quietly, but it wasn't a heavy quiet. It wasn't the kind that pressed down on you. It was the kind that let you breathe. After breakfast, the rancher stepped outside to begin the chores. He assumed the kid might stay inside, maybe rest a little longer. But within a few minutes, he heard the door creak open. The kid walked out, hesitant but determined. "I want to help," he said. The rancher raised an eyebrow. "You sure it's real work, not the punishment kind, the real kind?" The kid nodded. "I want to do something." So the rancher handed him a pair of gloves that were too big and showed him how to feed the horses, how to scoop grain, how to check the water trough. And something strange happened. Every time the kid did a chore, the rancher noticed a flicker of pride in his eyes. Not because he was impressing anyone, but because he was allowed to exist without criticism. At one point, the kid looked up at the sky, the bright, wide, open sky, and something in his face changed. Like he was seeing a world far bigger than the one he'd been trapped in. The rancher watched him silently, not wanting to break the moment. "You ever think," the kid said slowly, "that maybe I could, I don't know, be different? Be someone better?" The rancher leaned against the fence. "You're already different from what your father said you were." "Yeah, but," the kid swallowed. "I want to be strong, not the kind he meant, a different kind." The rancher nodded. "Then that's what you work toward, you build it day by day. Strength ain't something you pretend to have. It's something you earn from surviving and choosing differently." The kid looked away, emotions tangled on his face, fear, hope, doubt, all mixed together. "Is it really possible?" he whispered. The rancher didn't smile, but his voice softened. "Kid, the fact you're asking that question means you're already on your way." And the kid looked down at his hands, the same hands he once believed were only good for failure. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, they could build something new. Not for his father, not out of fear, but for himself. And standing there in the morning sun, with the ranch stretching out around them like a promise, both of them felt something shift. Something small, something quiet, something real.